The president of that firm, I'd hear him say again and again and again, in my professional opinion, the single most important factor for success in the business world is a high energy level. He rated it above brain power, looks, personality, academic credentials. He didn't discount those, but he said the most crucial thing for particularly remarkable success in your career is a high energy level.
As we get into this today and we start talking about how you experience a quantum leap and a shift in strategy versus trying harder. If you're watching this today, I want to thank you, number one, for joining us. My name is Coach Micheal Burt, and I'm here at the Greatness Factory of Nashville, which is about a $7.5–8 million training complex that we built in downtown Nashville. And someone sent me a copy of U Squared, one of my students, and said, you should read this book called U Squared. And I quickly devoured it, 37 pages, and I was hungry for more. And I go, man, this is a guy I've been looking for over the last couple of years. If you're like me, a lot of people are looking for a mentor or a coach. I was a deep disciple of Covey from 18 to 25, and then a lot of coaches along the way. And I was just kind of at that point in my life that I was looking for that person to come into my life. And that book, I go, I think I found my guy. And it was Dr. Pritchett. I started reading the other books. And then I happened to be speaking in Fort Worth, Texas at a big event. And I said, I'm going to give it a shot if I could just go meet him in person and thank him in person. And I went and spent about an hour with him in his office and his daughter, and who runs his publishing division, Kim, who's delightful. And I said, would you be open, Dr. Pritchett, to doing something with me in 2025? And he said, draw it up, coach, and present it to me. And here we are, right? Dr. Pritchett, we drew up a program that you and I are going to be coaching in called the Quantum Leap Strategy. It's going to be meeting 4 times in Dallas, Texas, in person. And today I wanted to give people an opportunity just to really coach. You're going to see us coach on some things that we're going to be covering in that program. And I never forget what you told me. You said, that you were open and you're always looking for a new game to play. And I appreciate that about you.
Well, we need that. It was that this quote that I mentioned this in my latest handbook called Lucky You, where it says, I think we need adventure. We need change. We need real challenges. We need friction. We need resistance. And so I wrote, it's a key component in the Lucky You book, but there was a quote that I used in the book says, if you think adventure is dangerous, try routine. It's lethal. And I think that's something to keep in mind, and constantly stretching ourselves. We're born, we have this aspect of our psychological makeup that is this drive to grow, and it's what pushes us our entire life. And it's one of the things that we really work to enlist in the U Squared Masterclass.
Yeah. And really, there's not been a lot of access. Before we get into the questions, I mean, you really haven't done a lot of coaching programs where individuals could just come in and be coached and mentored by you over your career, because you're spending so much time in mergers and acquisition. Is that right?
You're right. I've spent my career to a large extent working with major corporations, 3M, General Electric, Westinghouse, and so on and so on and so forth. And working with them on major, large-scale change initiatives, major transformations. But in the process, I would be advising people at the C-level. And so you could say coaching them, advising them, it would very much be a lot of one-on-one time where you're kind of the wingman working with them and advising them through some high-risk zones.
Yeah, and what you see there, it's obviously to trigger things in you to write books about it and think about it. And so I'm excited about diving in today. If at any time during this session that we're coaching on, like I said, we had about 400 plus people register for this. Some may go back and get the replay. If you're interested in the program that Dr. Pritchett and I are going to be doing in Dallas, Texas, called the Quantum Leap Strategy, it'll be 4 days of coaching with he and I. Plus, you get 4 additional boot camps with me. You get all of our books. And we're really going to focus on one thing, which is how do you experience that quantum leap in your life and in your business? It's really an executive leadership program for those people who are maybe hit a stagnation or an incremental growth, and you're just frustrated and you're like, I'm ready to go to another level. That is who this program is for. So if anytime we're talking about it today, Kelly Eisler on my team will be on. You can just schedule a call with Kelly at coachburt.com, and she'll walk you through the tenets of the program. Okay. All right, let's get this party started. And I put together about 7 really key questions that if I was out there in the world and I was interested, this was kind of what led me to Price Pritchett, is I was interested in experience a quantum leap. I've been running a coaching business now for 17 years. I was a women's basketball coach before that, and we've had a lot of success. But at some point in life, you get to this point and you're like, okay, how do we get to that next level? How many of you, by raise of hands, would consider yourself people that just kind of grind it out and you're hard workers, and a lot of your strategy in life has been just to work harder? Can we see your hands if that's been you? And that would be me, folks, right? That would be me. If it's not working, we'll just try harder. And so my first question for Dr. Pritchett, and then we'll open up for some questions here toward the end, is how does one of the mindset of this grind, because that's what we're told. We live in a culture of hustle harder. The grind is kind of celebrated. How do they first get out of that grind mindset into this quantum leap mindset? And, is there a period of life that you think, there's all these studies where you got to stay with something for 10,000 hours or 10 years of practice? Are these things connected to each other, or is at some point it's like you just hit a ceiling and like, man, I'm looking for a new and better way here?
That's a good question. And it's I guess the answer will vary a lot from one person to the next. But generally speaking, if you look at the average person, there was a psychologist, a lady by the name of Wendy Wood out on the West Coast, and she studied habits. And her studies basically reflected the fact that the average person spends 43% of their typical day living it by habit. They follow the same paths to work. They wear the same few clothes out of their closet. They follow the same routines, relying on the same basic strategies or methodologies. And that becomes the comfort zone. And it can also be relabeled the danger zone. And you made the comment a few minutes ago, Coach, about we need challenges, we need tension, we need friction, and we need that, but there is a tendency, I think, to move the other direction so much of the time. The Navy SEALs, they have a thing called the 40% rule. And the idea of the 40% rule is what they maintain is that the average person, when they're working to accomplish a project, work on a problem, whatever, when they get to about the 40% point of the effort, the struggle, that's where they peak. That's where they quit. They don't try any harder. When in fact there's another 60% of latent talent, latent ability that's there if we put before ourselves the challenge to pull that out of ourselves. And so if we talk about how do we break out of this, again, I do think it will vary from one person to the next. Sometimes we've just got a goal, some big ambition that we crave, and it's strong enough that it's the trigger. Sometimes it's a dire situation. I've seen this with corporations lots of times. So many mergers and acquisitions occur because, you got a company that's on the edge, and it's looking for someone to buy it out. And what I found over basically 5 decades of consulting to corporate America is that companies go through these very predictable dynamics. And you look at an individual, what's fascinating is when we set before ourselves a major objective, a big stretch goal, we go through those same dynamics pretty much. Mm-hmm. And part of what we will do in this Quantum Leap program is prepare people so that they anticipate these predictables and they know how to manage through them and around them. So we can talk as we go through the afternoon here about those very predictable dynamics. And I think one of the things that is just one of the prime advantages of having a wingman, a coach, a mentor, or somebody that's advising you through this is helping you see what's coming, know how to deal with it, preempt it to a large extent, and sometimes even exploit the problem.
Yeah. So the person out there that's in this mindset of grinding it out, but they're reaching a ceiling of complexity, they've hit a plateau. Some people are just forced to go, there's got to be a better way than this.
Right.
I'm sure there's a lot of people on this call who have said that along the way. There's got to be a better way than the way I'm doing this. And I could continue trying harder. And if you look back in your life when you experience a quantum leap, because that got me thinking about it is, even back in my coaching days, trying harder only got me back to the same point and more frustrated. I really just changed my strategy where I played better people. And it took me sitting down with 6 coaches that had won championships. And the first coach said, you need to play better teams. And if you play better teams, you're going to be battle tested. Your team is going to be tough enough. And the very next year, voila, we win a championship. And I didn't work any harder the next year than I did the year before. It was like 2.2 millimeters of change. That was it. Just a simple strategy change. And I think that's what we need. It just made me feel silly for waiting for 7 years to go seek that counsel. All right. So when you're thinking about this, a lot of people that are in our coaching programs have said they are open and have a desire to experience this quantum leap, but they don't really know where to get started. Okay. It's like, what do I do first? Okay. If I'm there and I'm frustrated, and I say frustration is your friend, right? And a lot of people think where there's no pain, there's no change. Like you really need to get frustrated enough. But once the person gets to that level, what do you recommend they do first? Do they go looking for somebody? Do they say, okay, I need to be with Coach and Price Pritchett? What do you think they need to do first to get into this movement?
Well, we do encounter a lot of people that they love the idea of making a quantum leap and just, moving to an entirely different orbit of performance and achievement. And yet there are so many people that they seem kind of lost. They're drifting. They can't find that sense of direction. It's like, what's my calling, And part of it, I think, is they've got too many options that they're putting before themselves. They're considering this wide array of possibilities that, they're basically positioned. They could do any number of things that sound pretty good. Barry Schwartz, some years ago, wrote this book called The Paradox of Choice. And you may have seen that, but he talks about this and how the result is that so many people just stall there and they never make a decision. They never really kick into gear. And it's kind of like marketing studies that he talks about in this book, where they put like a dozen different types of jams and preserves and jellies and stuff on a shelf. And people would come by, but they wouldn't make a choice. They wouldn't buy anything because there were so many options. They narrowed it down to like 3 possibilities, and the sales went up like crazy. And so I think that sometimes we just drift along in the fog of not knowing what we want, what we want most, and so forth. So the other thing, if people can't make up that decision, I think they're not thinking big enough. They're not excited enough. They're not hungry enough. The desire isn't there. And this is a counterintuitive thing, but usually they need to think on a different plane. They need to shoot for a bigger goal, something that really stirs the heart, and give themselves permission to start in that direction. It's interesting, Coach, and in all of this consulting I did for all these years with top executives, so much of the time, what I would be suggesting to them or advising them to do, I was giving them permission. It was a hugely valuable thing to them, giving them permission, more or less, to do something that is actually what they wanted to do or felt like they needed to do, but they were just kind of in that never land of not really feeling free to execute in that direction. So I think most people fly too close to the ground. They really have so much more potential, but they say to themselves, well, that's unreasonable. Maybe sounds like too hard. I don't have the resources, too many constraints here. People will laugh at me if I set that as my goal. And so we let all these things inhibit our ambitions. And it's really important to turn yourself loose.
Yeah.
The research is solid on this. Big goals work much better than small goals.
Yeah.
Because they energize you, they motivate you better, they call more of your potential into play. Big goals are like a growth hormone for a career. And it just has this pervasive effect. It rallies other people. Look at what so-and-so is doing.
Yeah.
Now, desire is the X factor, I think, in making a quantum leap. And some people are very, very comfortable where they are, and their need for achievement's not that great. They've reached a comfortable place in life. They don't want to risk anything, and that's fine. Even though I think virtually anybody can make a quantum leap in some sphere of their life.
Yeah.
You know, it's not my job to tell them they should. I think that is something that comes from within.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, for all the people that are here that's coached by us, we talk a lot about the NBO, the next big opportunity, and how do you define an aiming point? And I feel like the coaching program is going to combine helping people come up with this aiming point. And so, I always define an aiming point as a return on objective, a return on energy, a return on investment. It's highly profitable, it's highly meaningful, and it's highly enjoyable. When I listen to you talk about going into the mergers and acquisition, I was going back listening to our interviews earlier. We've got several interviews on YouTube that you guys can go back and watch. I listened to the nuance of your language, and there was huge, when you went into mergers and acquisitions, you said there was huge opportunity, huge potential, and it's like very meaningful, right? And it's like here's the big table, because when you went into that was kind of a new arena in the 70s of like choosing that aiming point and said, over the next so-and-so, we're going to dominate that. So I feel like a lot of people that get into this program, we're going to give them a framework where they're going to go, okay, I had 12 aiming points, which is why I'm dabbling. And now I've got one big aiming point. Okay.
Exactly. The rules are different for breakthrough. it's very different than just pursuing your typical aspirations, having a goal here or there. And I think, and you and I have chatted about this before, Coach, but if you really want to make a quantum leap, then you must narrow your focus. You must focus on less rather than more. And you'll read lots of books. I've read lots of books on if you want to lead a balanced life, you need to have goals in all these different areas. You need a financial goal. You'll need maybe a spiritual goal. You'll need physical goals about your health and well-being, and so maybe 5, 6 areas or so forth. Well, that's well and good. But if you want to make a quantum leap, you need to be sharply pointed as opposed to well-rounded for that particular period of time. And it's like if you're wanting to win the Super Bowl, well, at the same time, you're not planning a vacation for the family, and you're not doing, all of these other things that dilute the energy. And to that point, to that particular word, just a moment here about energy. I think this is the most overlooked word in all of the material on professional and personal development. I did my doctoral dissertation on breakthrough performance and self-directed change. And then I went to the Pentagon. I worked in the Pentagon for a while because I was getting my military time out of the way. I was in military intelligence. But then I went to work with a psychological consulting firm in Chicago. And it was a wonderful place for me because I got to work with Fortune 100 clients. And I was pretty naive at the time. I kept my mouth shut a lot in the meetings with clients. I listened, nodded knowingly, but anyway, the president of that firm, a very, very smart man and a very astute psychologist, but I'd hear him say again and again and again, he'd say, in my professional opinion, the single most important factor for success in the business world is a high energy level. He rated it above brain power, looks, personality, academic credentials, or whatever. He didn't discount those, but he said, in his opinion, the most crucial thing for particularly remarkable success in your career is a high energy level. Let's just think about that. If you go, why would he say that? And I didn't know at the time, and I didn't even know what he's talking about. We were doing psychological assessments of key executives that were being considered for hiring or promotion or whatever. This was a mainstay of our business there when I was with the firm in Chicago. And so I would be testing these people, doing an in-depth interviewing. And by the way, we use some of those same instruments in this coaching program, because the first thing we want to know is you. Because whatever your goal is, whatever situation you're pointing yourself toward, you always bring you. And getting into the nuances of you, your makeup, and so forth, positions us to do so much more helpful work with you in exploiting your strengths, maneuvering around the weaker points. But anyway, so we were doing these assessments, and the president of the firm would say, as I was working up my report on someone, he'd come in to kind of see how I was doing, and he would say, well, how's this person on energy? What's their energy level like? I didn't even know what he was talking about. I mean, I could kind of guess, but I didn't really know. But then he would keep hammering. It's the most important factor for success in the business world. So if you go to the dictionary and you look at the formal dictionary definition of energy, it's the capacity to do work. Now think about that. Energy is defined as the capacity to do work. Well, that's why you hire people. That's why you promote people. That's why you pay people. And that capacity to do work is a fundamental aspect of how you go about making a quantum leap. And I just said, you need to be sharply pointed rather than well-rounded. You need to focus that energy so that you get maximum thrust, maximum distance, maximum speed.
Well, and I think if you ask people what their primary skills are today, I know I do that around the country. A lot of people can't tell me what their primary skills are, and they don't know what problem they're uniquely qualified to solve or what energy they bring to the equation. So I think knowing you and that fundamental relationship between your primary skill and the problem that you could be both fascinated and motivated by, maybe even for the rest of your life, that brings a lot of energy to the equation. Now, that brings me to my next question. When you were doing these assessments, because that was really your role, and you did hundreds of assessments, and you said that you could put two people side by side, and on paper, they looked similar background, similar education, right? They were packaged up in a similar way. And you were, your company was in charge of kind of helping people choose which person they would bring in there. And you said, but one of these people was outperforming the other one, in multiples. And that kind of prompted you to want to write the book U Squared. So when you saw that, what was the X factor energy there, or was it what was it typically? Was it the energy that was the multiple, or was it mindset, or was it strategy? What was it that you saw when you wrote the U Squared book?
Well, of course, this could vary again based on the position that someone is being considered as a job applicant for. But yes, we would look at energy level, but we looked at how they approach problems mentally or intellectually. We looked at their emotional makeup, their psychological makeup, and how it played into their performance and how they use themselves in the world. We looked at interpersonal style, which is crucial in the world. And then we looked at motivations and aspirations. And out of that, we would be just boiling all this information down into about a 5-page report. But yeah, it was amazing. You'd see people that on paper they should be equally successful, but one would be 3 or 4 times as successful, regardless of how you want to measure success. And usually the most easily measure would be financial success. What was their income? What kind of money were they making? And there were people who they knew what they wanted. They made the right choices. They knew where and when to risk. What else would I say about that? It really comes down again, I think, to the value of having these kinds of insights into yourself when you say to you, I'm going to go for a quantum leap. Because let me tell you, there are some people who are much more structured than others. They need structure, they need closure, and they're very systematized and more linear in how they approach whatever work comes before them. There are some other people who are much more unstructured. There are some people who their interpersonal style is so different, they should not be in a position of managing others, but maybe they're very good at managing themselves. Maybe they're extremely well qualified for a number 2 or number 3 position. The other thing we would find out is what are these people's second and third order skills and talents? Because very often in making a quantum leap, your first impulse, as Coach has said, is to do what comes naturally, do what you've been doing, try to do it better, harder, put more effort into it and whatever. But usually in making a quantum leap, you're going to need to turn to some second and third order talents that are wonderful, but you're not engaging those like you should. And they are the things that give that added thrust.
And as part of this program, those are not front-facing tools that people can just readily purchase from you. As part of this program, each person that goes through the program is going to go through an assessment, and you're going to deconstruct that. You're going to deconstruct those findings in the first coaching session so people can really get to know themselves.
That's right. It's fascinating. It's when you get to look at you, it's the most fascinating topic there is, right? And particularly when you're getting, I think good feedback's hard to come by. I know it is. I am not a big advocate of performance appraisals because I think they say as much about the appraisor as they do the appraisee. And I think they all too often demotivate more than they motivate. But I tell you what, we have no vested interest in when we work with you in going through these assessments at the very beginning of the coaching program. We have no vested interest in making anyone look good, look bad, or whatever. We will focus on the person's strengths and talk about, okay, these weaker points, instead of beating yourself to death trying to overcome those, how do you maneuver around them most effectively? How do you, one of my philosophies is play to your strengths, hire to your weaknesses. That's going to serve you better than, let's say, if you're not that, you don't lean toward the numbers, the number crunching and the financial aspects of the business and so forth, but you're one hell of a strategist, we'll say. You can really chart a course for the company. You can inspire people and whatever. Wonderful leadership skills, maybe. Okay, play to those strengths.
Yeah.
Exploit those things to the fullest and pull around you. Maybe you hire somebody, you team with somebody. Maybe if you're trying to build your company, maybe you're not good at sales. Your organization's not that good at business development, but here's this other outfit. And if you acquire them, they're killer good at that particular game. So the assessment process, it's fascinating. The insights even bleed over into your personal life and at home, out in the world in general. It's just, we all have blind spots and we all can benefit from just a sharper sense of who we really are and where we play best.
Well, I think, one of my friends that had about $200 million company there in Dallas said to me once, he said, Burt, you're not scientific enough when you hire people. And what he was saying is you're making these gut predictions about people. There's really not enough assessment. You're not scientific enough. And he said, you look at an NFL before they invest in a person, look at how many tests, what kind of tests they do, psychological testing, character testing. And these companies you worked with really understood that, right? Which is why they hired you. They wanted to really know out of this talent pool, who is the best that we could hire to move this company from A to B. And I think we coach a lot of small business leaders that I would say there's like corporate, there's not corporate enough, and then there's probably too corporate. And I would say there's a lot of people that we coach that's not corporate enough, meaning it's still mom and pop, but they want to grow. Maybe they're doing $5 million. Maybe they're doing 7 million, but they want to get to 50 million, but they're trying to do it with very average, talented players because there's really no assessment. There's really no science to it at all. It's just like, well, let's just take whoever and try to go win championships with them. And that's not how sports teams do it. That's not how the big boys and the big girls do it. And I think part of what this program is we're going to be helping people really kind of grow up and mature to think at a higher level and really take it to a more corporate level to get that right. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, it is. And I think another thing that kind of to tag on to that, I think that people, when they come to the conclusion they want to make a quantum leap, they overcomplicate. It is so common. I cannot tell you how many times people have come to me and said, okay, I bought U Squared. I love the book. It's changed my life, which is kind of funny because then they would say, but how do I really do this? And I would say, go back and read the book, back and read the book and do what the book says. But these are some people that have a high need for structure. You know, give it to me by the numbers a little bit more. So what did I do? Well, I sat down and I wrote the sequel, which is called the Quantum Leap Strategy. It's basically the same dang message that I wrote in U Squared. The chapter headings are mostly identical, but I said it with different words. We did add one thing in there in the Quantum Leap Strategy, which is the Quantum Leap Ritual. And this gets into mindset more specifically and some ways of working with your brain that really brings out some magic in the process of a quantum leap.
Well, when you think about that, kind of leads into my question is, you know, when you share the quantum leap strategy with an analytical mind, and they go, well, tell me specifically what I'm supposed to do. And they're like, well, why has this book helped you so much? And I said, well, the book opened my mind up to thinking like this. How do I get from here to there? Okay, could it be through strategic partnership? Could it be through hiring the right people? Could it be through merger or acquisition? Could it be through, right? What it does is it opens the mind. And this is where you just got to go, okay, it's telling you what to do. Let's try different versus try harder. Okay, this is what we've been doing. This is where we gotten to, right? It's like Goldsmith's old book, that what got us here won't get us there.
Exactly.
We're here, and whatever we've done to this point has got us here. Now, what if you've gotten to $5 million every year for the last 5 years, doing it the way you've been doing it, and you're frustrated, and it's like, okay, what do I go do? Okay. And that's really where the program comes in, because now we're showing you, okay, this is going to open your mind, but there's also something to Price's work. You hear me talk a lot about the remarkable boldness, which is really psychological flexibility to move forward with something, even if you don't know where it's going to end up. It's like, I'm open. I'm not closed. And that to me is really what remarkable boldness is. So there's something about the way you write. And what you get into, you gave me 16X, which has been a great focusing tool for me on the highest use of my time to get to where we're going. Then you've got Lucky You, which Randy Thompson is already enrolled in this program, is one of his favorites. He's already going to be with us. But how does luck play into this quantum leap? Because since reading Lucky You and being open, you'd be shocked what kind of things have happened in my life, Price. Just being open. Just moving and circulating and being open to possibility. Talk a little bit about how that plays into this strategy.
Okay. So Lucky You, we rolled that out, published that early this year. Okay. So it's almost a year old. So why did I write Lucky You? Because I came to realize how big, or I came to appreciate, I guess you'd say, how big a role luck plays in one's career, and that there are things we can do very purposefully, pretty simply, to invite luck into our world. And it was interesting to me, there were like 57,000 plus books with leadership in the title published, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago on Amazon. 57,000 books. You go looking for books on luck, I found, I think, about a dozen, but I didn't find them easily. I mean, I kept discovering them and so on and so forth. And I wrote Lucky You just out of my head with what did I know as a psychologist and as someone who's worked with corporate America and entrepreneurial firms all these years. And I want to tie this whole thing of luck, back to what you were mentioning just a minute ago, because I think it needs a little bit more time. And this is the thing about some people who are very visionary, and then some people who are much more analytical minded. And it's really funny how the idea of quantum leaps and the U squared message, how it resonates with people differently. It's much more readily embraced by the people who are more of the visionary types. The highly analytical types, they're skeptical.
Yeah.
They're just skeptical. It sounds too woo-woo for them, like unscientific, like cotton candy thinking or something, okay? When I'm doing a keynote or working with a small management or executive group, and U squared is in the what we're playing with, if I've got some serious engineers and accountants, CPAs, and maybe a few lawyers in the room, I know, man, I've got a fight on my hands, because, and it comes down to how people approach life. You got some people that are playing to win, that's their bias. And then you've got other people who are playing not to lose.
Good. Yeah.
If you're one of these people who plays to win, the U squared message goes straight to your heart.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're one of these people who's playing not to lose, doesn't mean you're not going to be hugely successful. You certainly can. Many of them are, but they're far more cynical, skeptical, and that's one of the things we find out. We get a good sense of that in the assessment process, and they approach it a little bit differently. This whole idea of making just a super advancement, just a non-linear move in their career that doubles or triples their overall performance. So the salespeople, corporate strategy people, they're much more attuned to the U squared message. And like I said, they dig in and they're right with you. But
yeah, when people say that to me, it's like, what, that I said, look, probably the least cotton candy person I know is Pritchett. I'm like this, everything he's got is backed up by research. I said, there is no cotton candy with Pritchett. Okay. But it's simple, and it's because you believe in the minimum effective dose when you write these books. And a lot of people may look at something and go, well, it's only 37 pages. It couldn't be life-changing. But the truth is, your approach is everything to this. Okay. I was looking for a quantum leap when I found Pritchett. Okay. And it's like, okay, I'm open. I'm hungry. I'm humble. I'm teachable. I'm alert. I'm curious. I'm responsive. And I'm pragmatic. I was a former basketball coach. Everything's based on probability, statistics to me. We can drive up the probability of winning. We can drive down the probability of winning in sales, in business, and everything. So that answers the question about the analytical people. Now, let me finish with this one, and then we'll take a few questions from the group. We have been in the process of hiring and bringing on a new chief revenue officer to focus on the revenue of our company. And when I'm doing my quantum leap strategies, I'm like, okay, this is a who that we need to come in and help us here. But I even found myself, Price, having some of those feelings you talk about in mergers and acquisitions of fear. Like, hey, here's a guy who's going to come in and change things. Right. And I kept going back to what you talk about when you went into these mergers and acquisition. It's human nature to be afraid. And so when you think about this, how does the psychology and what we're going to be teaching, because it's clear that a lot of these people on this call, they need to make moves. They need to hire people. They need to invest in their infrastructure. They need to but there's a fear that villain voice is going to tell them, oh, this person's going to come in and change everything. So how does the psychology play into really priming a leader to get ready to make those moves?
Well, it helps to know how we're built as human beings and what a lot of our inborn instincts predispose us to do.
Mhm.
When you set out to make a quantum leap, you're introducing major change into your thinking, some of your doing, and so forth. So what happens in the brain? The first scan is for danger. That's how we're wired. We're just hardwired that way from birth. John Dryden, the playwright, said, self-defense is nature's oldest law. And it comes on full bore. And again, what happens to you as an individual typically will closely parallel what happens in a corporation when it's being acquired, or maybe if there's going to be a pretty full bore merger, a blending of the two companies. Man, these dynamics hit both sides of the deal. So the first thing that happens is like a fog settles in over the company, and the future blurs out. There's a lot more questions than answers. Okay. And some people handle ambiguity and uncertainty a lot better than others. I happen to have a high tolerance for ambiguity. My wife, Patty, when we first married, well, she's quite different. She would want to start planning Christmas holiday in August. Well, are we going to go with my family or with your family? And who will we be with at Thanksgiving? I'd say, it's late summer, let's let it roll. We don't know. Let's gather more data, get more inputs and so forth. Anyway, we've lasted for over 60 years, so we worked that out fairly well, I guess. But anyway, so there's just this cloud of ambiguity and uncertainty settles in over a company. Now, what I want you to do as I say this is translate the dynamics to what happens to you when you decide to pull the trigger and go for a quantum leap. So there's all of a sudden there's this new fog of ambiguity and uncertainty, like what's this going to involve? Next thing is there's a drop in the trust level in the corporate world. People get suspicious of management. They don't trust management. Okay. You will begin to doubt yourself. It's that same drop in the trust in you. That's just pretty natural. And the third thing is, in the corporate world, self-preservation becomes a dominant driver of employee behavior.
Wow.
How do I protect me in this situation? Well, that same thing goes on in your brain. How could I get hurt in this quantum leap? What could go wrong? And so forth. You've got two voices in your head. You've got a hero voice and a villain voice. And the villain voice comes on strong. This is the one that talks to you, whispers to you about your weaker points, the times you failed, all of the things that could cause you to get embarrassed in this endeavor, and so forth. You need to listen to your hero voice, who talks to you about your strengths, your talents, your potential, the times you've won in the past, and what a great possibility this is. And part of this whole dynamic here is how we weigh losses differently than we weigh gains, and also how we weigh potential losses differently than we weigh gains. And Daniel Kahneman is a psychologist who won the Nobel Prize. Now, he didn't win the Nobel in psychology, he won it in economics, because what he found, and this has become one of the classic things in the literature, he found that we weigh losses twice as heavily as we weigh gains, or the potential for wins versus the potential for losses. So what we do in a situation like this is we make this very lopsided assessment. We're not fair to ourselves about the possibilities. Okay? It helps to know that. It helps to know that because it makes it a lot easier to shut down the villain voice and listen to your hero voice.
Well, I'm really, really excited about this work with you in 2025. And I've been telling people if I was going to be in a coaching program for me, I'd be in this with you. So I think there's a lot of executives who are out here or people that are leading companies, no matter what size company you're leading, if it's a small startup or you're just getting started, but you want to grow your leadership skills and you're serious about experiencing a quantum leap in the business, if you've hit the same point over and over and you're tired of staying at that level, you're frustrated. Imagine spending a year with both Dr. Pritchett and myself, coaching you through how to experience that quantum leap. It's 4 full days in Dallas, Texas. The dates are already set with Dr. Pritchett and I, and it's 4 boot camps here at the Greatness Factory with me as well. You get all of our content, which is a lot of books, folks, because he and I have been busy writing a lot of books over the years. And it's going to be like the best of the best with us. Okay. It's our greatest hits. So a couple things you need to know, and then we'll take some questions. The first 10 people that enroll in the program are going to get a private coaching session with Dr. Pritchett and I, and that is on December 16th. So that's coming up. We already had, I think, 6 enrollees. So we've got about 4 spots left to get that private coaching session with us. We're only going to take 30 to 50 people in this program, so it won't be thousands of people. It'll be intimate with us. 4 sessions in Dallas, Texas, 4 additional boot camps, plus we will give you the assessment, and Dr. Pritchett will be breaking down the assessment in the first session. So to me, it's going to be a home run program. We're really excited about delivering this and coaching this. If you want to schedule a strategy call, Kelly at coachburt.com. And Kelly, if you'll post the link in there and let people see everything that's covered in the Quantum Leap strategy. And if you want to talk to me personally about the program, I'd be happy to visit with you as well and talk to you about this. But at the end of the day, like I said, somebody asked me the other day, what would you do, coach? And I said, if I wasn't coaching the program, I'd be in this program because I think it's going to be that valuable to work with Dr. Pritchett over the next year. I think it's going to, I think there's just really, really big things that are going to happen as a result of this. So Dr. Pritchett, if you're open for it, let's take a few questions from the folks. And Steve Miller, why don't you start us off? And then I'm going to ask a few people who've already joined the program, maybe Randy Thompson and a few people who've already decided to join us to tell us why they decided to join this program. I think it'd be good for everybody to hear. So Steve, what's your question?
Sir, thank you so much, Coach. Dr. Pritchett, the question I have is how important is it to stay in your flagship abilities? And then how does that relate to like your attitude? And how does that relate to a quantum leap in your future?
What was the first part of what you said? It's kind of low volume, Steve.
How important is it to stay in your flagship ability in relation to attitude and quantum leap?
Okay, good question. Well, as long as you're playing to your major strengths, your signature strengths, your flagship abilities, those, when you're in that zone, you're naturally motivated. That feels good to you. And so I think, first of all, that's where you learn the fastest. That's where you enjoy the work the most. That's probably where you're going to be the most effective. And so it makes a world of sense to play to those. But like I said a while ago, a quantum leap very well may kind of call forth some attention to some second and third order talents that there's a ton of potential there. It's just not being utilized, and it can be a real addition to the speed and lift that you get in making a quantum leap. And the last part of the question had something to do with your attitude, or what was it?
Yes, sir. What does staying in your flagship have to do with your attitude? And I think you covered a little bit of that.
Yeah. That's where you're going to be the happiest, probably. And that's where I try to play. Now, you will need from time to time to put yourself in another place, because that's when you're moving out of your comfort zone. And so much of the time, you've been playing to your strengths somewhat. You're doing things that come natural, that you're comfortable doing. Maybe hopefully you kind of enjoy that. But if you're really wanting to change gears and hit a much higher altitude, then I think you need to bring some tension, and you'll resist it. But we need resistance in our life. When I go to the gym, I don't go there to be comfortable. I go there and make myself uncomfortable. And that puts your body into the growth zone. And that's probably going to be a part of the whole quantum leap process.
Yeah, nice. Okay, Austin, how you doing, sir?
Good, Coach. Good. Thank you for bringing Price onto this. So it's first one to say thank you. Second, Price, your book is probably the first book I ever read out of the ones I had to read in high school. I've probably read this thing. I've probably read this thing 100 times. I've given away 500 copies of this. My question to you with this book is, other than The Fly, which was amazing, by the way, other than The Fly, what was your most recognized chapter of this book by the public in terms of feedback?
Boy, I don't know that I could single one out. It's easier to say that the thing people love the most is the story of The Fly, you know. Beyond that, I really don't know. If you notice, the chapter headings are for the most part very counterintuitive coaching points. Try easier, make your move before you're ready. Well, that doesn't seem to make sense, but that's a catchier way of saying it. And it gets to the truth of what needs to happen more. It works better than a chapter heading that would say, don't overplan,
Yeah.
and that's the problem that a lot of people fall into. And the resistance shows up, the resistance to take this leap and to take those new risks, go out on a limb and so forth. It's born there it shows up in the over planning, getting ready. And my line that I use there is, that's where big dreams go to die. That's the graveyard where quantum leap dreams, there's tombstones everywhere, where people, they just couldn't move out of the planning and preparation and waiting a little bit for a more opportune time. Okay.
Well, I've got my favorite chapter here, Dr. Pritchett, since that was the question. And this is the most unconventional to most people, is focus on ends rather than means. Okay, so this is where that plan to win, in my opinion. I was a basketball coach, and I always said offense wins games, because you hear all these people say defense wins championships, and I would say, no, you can't win championships if you don't score points. And so to me, focusing on the end versus the means is where so many people get stuck. The mechanics of just how to go from A to B.
Exactly. Here's the thing. If you're aiming for a super ambitious quantum leap, you cannot plan the route. You don't know enough to plan it. And just to give you a quick story about a quantum leap I made, okay? It was at the end of the 1970s. And my company here in Dallas was just running smooth as glass. We weren't making mistakes. And it disgusted me to no end. And finally I said, that's it. And I changed everybody's job in the company, and we moved to a new facility. And the reason was we'd gotten too comfortable. Like I said, we weren't stretching. There was no tension. There was no growth hormone at work.
Yeah.
And so, but when I said we're going to go into merger work, the people in the company, and it was a small firm, it was a boutique consulting firm. That's what we've always been. But they were like, Christ kind of lost it this time, didn't he? Go into merger work. What does that mean? We haven't done that. We don't know how to do that, and so forth. And it didn't. But my goal was to be number one in merger integration strategy work. I didn't set a deadline. It wasn't about making the money per se. I just wanted to do this. There were 4 or 5 things that drove me. I was just kind of doing some long range planning, and I thought, okay, I'm tired of this. We got so much more that we could do than this. And I wanted to break new ground. I wanted to work with the very top players in a corporate world. I wanted to be able to have a high billing rate do things where there would be a lot of work to be done over the years to come. And I said, it's going to be merger integration work. I didn't know how we were going to get there. And if you set a goal that's the right kind of goal, there's more that you don't know about the ways and means than you do know. But you begin what you have with what you've got. That's a line from Mary Morrissey, who's one of my friends and does a lot of work in this particular area too. Begin where you are with what you have. You've got a goal, okay? And if you can set a deadline and it's reasonable, if you've got enough control over the situation, that's fine. But sometimes, if you said, I'm going to write a New York Times bestseller and I want to do it within 2 years, you're setting yourself up for failure in a way, because there are too many uncontrollables, too many dynamics that come into play. But I do believe in strict deadlines for intermediate goals, the milestone goals to get you there. But I just started doing things. So you set your big goal, write down 3 to 5 things you could do right now that close the distance between you and the goal, and start execute.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Okay, let's take one question, and then Randy, we're going to wrap with you because you're already in the program. You've enrolled in the program. I want you to talk about why you enrolled in the program. And like I said, we got about 4 spots left to get the private coaching session for those people that enroll and get started with us. And what I like about Price and I, there's no hard pressure from us to try to get you to do it, because I heard Price say he never talked somebody into wanting to make a quantum leap. So it's what we're looking for, people who go, I'm ready to play at a much higher level, and I want to make a quantum leap. That's why I'm enrolling in the program, to be coached by you two. Okay. Is that Sharian? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah, Shireen. Hi, everybody. This is really good. Thank you for this. Price, I was introduced to your work through Bob Proctor a while ago, and since then I've been studying your books religiously. Bob recommended it, and I found it really amazing. You said something was intriguing to me today. You talked about playing on your strengths, but then you said the quantum leap would need us to tap into the second and the third talent. So my question, how do you get to that? Or how do you know what the talents, or if I can frame it differently, how quickly can you get to the stage where you realize I need to tap into different talents?
The journey will dictate it. It's kind of like, okay, if you want to get out there to that goal, for example, I said I'll tell you another quantum leap that we made real quickly. In high school, there were 3 of us guys that we decided we want to have a rock and roll band. Now, this was a long time ago, but this just seemed like the most wonderful thing in the world. We were going to have a rock and roll band. And we didn't really set a firm goal other than that. We wanted to have this band. None of us had an instrument. 3 of us that would, one guy on bass, one guy on lead guitar. I was on rhythm guitar, and I was the singer. And the drummer borrowed drums from the high school. And we just began, and we learned to play. And we eventually, within a couple of years, we put out a record that hit 74, 78 or something like that on the top 100 Billboard chart. We didn't make any money, just for the record, but we had a hell of a wonderful time. Okay. Well, I had to do some things that I didn't even know how to do. I didn't know how to play a guitar. When I set this goal to make a quantum leap in the M&A field, I had not written a book. Now, I had 2 degrees in English. I had a bachelor's and a master's in English. And so I knew I was pretty good with the written word and so forth, but I'd never dealt with a publisher. I had to, so I did that. I had to learn how to do that. I had to figure out how to grind out a book and so forth. But let's say somebody wanted to get into doing podcasts, but they're kind of introverted and they don't feel very fluent or articulate in front of a microphone, but they're dying to have this podcast on whatever topic suits their fancy. Well, you're going to have to rely on something that you can do. You just can't do it nearly as well as the things you do best. And if there's enough desire, if there's enough fire in the heart, enough commitment, then you go to those things and you're willing to make the mistake, screw up, do a pretty weak job early on, because as the old Chinese proverb says, failure is the mother of all success. And I wrote a blog here just a few days ago about failure and how we mischaracterize failure. It's the best tutor, the best coach that we'll ever find.
Yeah.
And if you're not advancing like you wish in a quantum leap, or just in general, in achieving your ambitions, then you're probably not failing enough. You're probably not aggressively getting yourself out there and trying things that need to be tried.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, that's giving me hope. I'm 48 and always wanted to be a country music singer, Price. So I may give it a shot and go down to Broadway this afternoon and just get on
There you go.
stage somewhere.
Absolutely.